Welcome to another episode of Yoga Biz Champ with myself, Michael J. I love episodes like today's where I get to meet a yoga studio owner for the first time and just pick their brain on how they got their studio going and how they figured things out. And this is a really nice, inspiring story with Martine from Home Studio and her story about how her studio was inspired by a studio experience in Brazil. Enjoy. I'm really excited to have one of the latest Yoga Biz Champs out there, Martine Hamers from Home Studio in San Anselmo, California. Welcome, Martine.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here.
Is the owner of Home Studio Yoga in San Anselmo, California, a mum of two beautiful little children and the cutest pug in the world. She was born in the Netherlands, lived most of her adult life in South America and the US, and is deeply intrigued by culture and community. She also has a master's degree in corporate anthropology and formerly helped companies sort out cultural integration following mergers and acquisitions. Living as an expat in Brazil, her local yoga studio became her home away from home. The studio was deeply rooted in community and an inspiration for her studio today. Working at the YMCA and serving people in need was also a big life influence and shapes how she shows up for her community today. I love that. Living through the pandemic as a new mom, finding herself isolated and lonely is ultimately what inspired Martine to open Home Studio, a studio designed to be inclusive where people can come get together to practice yoga and create meaningful local connections. Hey.
Hi. Yes.
So great to have you here. There's a lot of words in there that showed up that rang true to me,
Yeah.
which is community. Yeah.
I feel like that is a thing that has been weaving through a lot for me, community, in
Mm.
many different ways and forms. But as it says, like I'm born and raised in the Netherlands. I did a master's degree in corporate anthropology, which a lot of people don't know even exists, but it's it's a way where we really look at the cultures of companies, and particularly when we start up a new company and we want to think about what is important to us. The culture is really important to also set,
Yeah.
because that will set the tone for who you bring in, right? What kind of
Yep.
people will come, who will be your customers, who will you work with? Or if you have two mergers happening, that also we bring two cultures together. So that is what I worked on and what I did for quite a few years until I moved to Brazil. I followed someone along to Brazil. And
Sure,
when I
there's a
got to
whole
Brazil,
story there.
there's a whole story there. But anyway, I followed someone to Brazil. Let's
Sounds like a
keep
movie
it there.
already.
And when I got to Brazil, it turned out that I was not allowed to work there. I could stay there. I had visas to stay, but I couldn't work. And so I had I'd done my yoga teacher training, and I was like, why not teach? Like, why not? This is the perfect time to start that. And so I started teaching and also got connected to a studio there, which was called Yoga Flow in Sao Paulo. And it was just such a beautiful studio. I've met so many of my friends in Brazil I met through that studio because they had this place where you would walk in and they had this seating area and they always had some tea available and everybody would come in early. The teachers would be there. And so you would meet with them and talk to them. And it was very friendly, very community oriented. So
Can you just talk
I,
about that part?
yeah,
Like, why was that important, that part there? Because,
why that was important for me, I was a foreigner. I didn't know
yeah,
anybody, right? And so for me, it was really important that there was this community. But in general, it was the first time ever I really came to a yoga studio where that was so much part of it, in the
yeah,
sense that they thought it was really important that you would have a connection with your teacher other than just the teacher is in front of the room and
right,
they will
right.
be teaching you something. So one of the things that was actually funny, and I learned later that that part is actually normal, but it's like everybody after class comes up to the teacher and gives them a kiss or a hug. And but it was just really lovely. And I just and sitting down there because most of the classes were upstairs in that building. So sitting down there with the people that you were going to do your yoga class with and drinking some tea and having that connection with your teacher, it was very natural that you started to have more connections with others too. So I would see that same person over and over again. And so at some point you start talking and then you see them in another class. And but the fact that you were all there and hanging out with your teacher, seeing your teacher as a human, just as the teacher, it's like
you
a real human. uh, That what to me just changed a lot about how I looked at who I am as a teacher,
yeah
who I wanted to be as a teacher,
yeah
or what I find important when I look at community and yoga community. Yeah. And so I also taught a bit there at that studio, but it all had to be in Portuguese. So that was, I
okay.
did learn to speak Portuguese, but that was quite the challenge. But still, it was
Did you
nice that,
meditate?
yeah, I definitely made my really big fair share of like mistakes or said really weird stuff because it turned out that the word that I thought was that word wasn't. But anyway, the other big thing that I did there, which was really awesome actually, was like there was this, now I can come up with the name of that organization, but there was this expat organization that is known worldwide. And I just plugged into that one and I said, hey, I'm going to organize like a donation-based yoga class in Ibirapuera Park, which was the biggest park in Sao Paulo. And anybody who wants to join can join. And so I started it on a Saturday morning, and for the first few weeks, it was mostly my friends, the people that I had met already. But it quickly grew, and I was there or I did that for 2 years. And by the end, like it was always somewhere between 60 and 80 people
Wow,
that showed up.
that's
And it
amazing.
was very much also community because it was people bringing other people and
Yeah.
like people were hanging out afterwards. At some point, we would just all have picnics and hang out for another hour or two. And it was super fun. And also that was like, but it was an expat community. So it was a lot of foreigners that were all like trying to figure out like, where do the people go? Like, how do I make friends? And so that was a really great way to just, yeah, get the people coming together and practice together and use yoga as a way to create
Mm.
space for people to come together. Yeah. So that was a really fun experience. And then from there, which is funny, I was with the same person that I followed to Brazil. We got an opportunity to move again, and they said you can go to either Melbourne, New York, or San Francisco. And I'd never been to San Francisco, and somehow it was calling me, and I said, "Okay,
Mm.
we're going. Let's pack up and leave." And so I went to San Francisco, and then I came here, and it's a beautiful place, but there's a lot of yoga, right? A lot of people,
Yeah.
a lot of yoga
Yeah.
places. There are a lot of like great teachers. So anyway, I also here I used yoga as a way to find community. The other big community, which is something completely different that I got into, was more like the creative Burning Man community. That
Okay.
also taught
Yeah.
me a
Yeah.
lot
Yeah.
about how
Yeah.
community is.
Yeah.
And then and so through yoga, I ended up just also again making a lot of friends and finding like-minded people. And then fast forward, I moved to north of the city to Marin County, north of the Golden Gate Bridge, into a small town, San Anselmo. And I became a parent in the pandemic, feeling completely isolated, lonely.
Mm.
Everybody has their isolated story, but like
Yep.
becoming a parent in the pandemic without any help was quite jarring. I was like, wow.
Yeah.
And I really had such a strong yearning for community. And so now the story of the studio was interesting because I have to back that up a little bit too. So I share my studio with someone else, the space with Jocelyn is her name, and she does We Yogis, and that's kids yoga. And so we share the
Okay.
space because we found out that you can utilize space a lot more because kids yoga happens a lot of times at times where adult
Where
yoga
there's
doesn't
dead zone.
happen.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I was on maternity leave for my second baby in 2022 in December, and I went to a retreat in Hawaii, a Ram Dass Legacy Retreat. And I took my kids with me, and I'm doing this kids yoga class there. And this amazing woman is teaching it. And after class, I come up to her, and for whatever reason, she asked me for my phone number. And she goes, "Oh, that's a Bay Area number." And I was like, "Yeah, that's where I live." She says, "Oh, me too." I was like, "Oh, that's awesome. Where do you live?" She goes, "North of the bridge." I was like, "Oh, me too. Where do you live?" Just San Anselmo. I was like, "No way, me too." So
Mm.
we got along really well. And then she did a little pop-up for kids yoga in San Anselmo. turned out, and she was looking for another space. And in the meantime, I had just started working, like started teaching yoga again, also at a local studio here, because I didn't want to teach in the city any longer, because my community now really was here, local. And that's how and while I just got started teaching, a few weeks into it, like less than 8 weeks into it, the studio owner comes up to me and says, Martina, I've decided to close down the studio. And I was like, no, just found this local place. And he was like, are you interested in taking it over? And I looked at him and I was like, hell no. I have a 2-year-old and a 5-month-old. I don't know. That sounds like crazy. I said no, but I said my friend is looking for a place. Jocelyn, she does Wii yogis. You should talk to her. So he did, but then I started thinking. I was like, wait, what does it even mean? Take it over? What do you mean with that? And so I started talking to him, and he was like, no, I'm giving my studio away. You just need to take on the lease. And that changed everything for me, because I had been manifesting community. I had been talking about it. I want
Mm.
community. Yoga is the way I get community. And here I am, somebody handing me literally a yoga studio. And I was like, this is, I think, the universe handing me a yoga studio. So I guess I have to do this. So that's how I started my studio. He did close everything down. So I didn't start it with, the studio had a different name.
So you
None of
started fresh as a
I started completely
you
new.
started
Yeah,
fresh,
new.
because this is what the area I help people with, is in that starting of the studio phase. And so this
Yeah,
wasn't like you were buying the studio and taking
no, no.
passes and things like that. You were starting from scratch with the
The only
space.
thing I took over was his software. So I had like previous emails of people that had come through his studio.
Yeah.
So I had some sort of something to start with, like some kind of mailing list.
Okay, so you did take
Um,
on, he gave, with the studio, they gave you the
yeah, he told
contact
me I can
database as
close.
well.
Yeah, he was like, I can close it down or you can keep it. And I was like, that's very valuable to keep it
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
because
yeah,
it has
yeah.
all the information in
It's
there.
a good
So
boost to start with.
yeah, so it gave me just at least, yeah, an email list and contact details to start with.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, so that's how I got to this studio.
So
And then
was it
yeah,
called the same name prior, or did you
no,
rename it?
I
And
renamed it. Before it was called San Anselmo Yoga, and it also in an older version was called Marin Power Yoga, and I called it Home Studio for the
yeah,
reason that community literally weaves into everything for me. But when I was teaching in the city in San Francisco, I was teaching at different studios, and people would always ask me, what's your home studio? What's the studio where you
yeah,
feel
yeah,
most at home, where you
yeah,
feel like
yeah, yeah,
that's
yeah,
your studio, like your
yeah,
main one? And that was just a thing. And so when I opened my studio, kind of was like, this is home studio, and it needs to feel homey so people can come, like that experience in Brazil. So also my studio, when you come in, has like couches and a nice seating area, and has tea and a place where people can sit and come together. So that's, people also, when they talk about the name, they also say it's homey, like a very homey
yeah.
space. Yeah.
And did you have to do much to the space? Did you put your own stamp on it? Did you?
I put my own stamp on it, but because it was a yoga studio
Yeah,
before and it had all the props and all the stuff that you need,
yeah,
it had
yeah.
a nice floor in there.
It's a
I
simple
didn't have,
startup.
it was simple. So I painted the walls, and we redid sort of the spaces, and it looks very different now. We put in a lot of plants, a lot of life plants and like couches, and we just reorganized the whole space. But we didn't have to make this big
Yeah,
financial commitment in,
yeah.
okay, now I need to put a floor in, and I need to buy all the blocks, and I need to, like, most of the stuff was there. So that
Did
sense
you
was
take on
easy.
any of the previous teachers, or?
Yeah, I took on, so before the pandemic, this studio was really successful. It had about 600 memberships. And then past pandemic, it only had 3 teachers left. And then I added on as a fourth, and it only had less than 40 memberships. So
Wow,
it
yeah,
got crushed in the
yeah.
pandemic. And I did take on all 3 of the teachers. And luckily, with all three of them, they have been a good fit for the studio
Yeah,
and for
yeah.
what I've been doing. And I also know that I'm very lucky there because it could also have been completely different.
I've worked with studio owners that in
Yeah,
particular on the you start from scratch there, but taking on some legacy things. But
yeah,
some of the studios that somebody that purchases a studio is
yeah,
also quite often inheriting a lot of the problems that were
yeah,
there as well, and people wise too.
yeah.
It's it's a common.
There were a lot of problems with the studio. Still, some of them that I'm not 100% sure of what exactly happened, but there were like there was a lot happening among the teachers and the owner and the teachers. And there was
Right,
one other teacher actually that was still with the studio. So I said that wrong, and I didn't take her on because she decided to leave by herself. But she had been really big with the previous studio,
right.
and at first, when she was like, "I'm leaving, I'm going somewhere else," I thought, "No," she was the biggest name
The
for the
big draw.
studio, the
Yeah,
big draw. But afterwards, I was actually really grateful that she did leave because the other ones
yeah,
were newer, and so they didn't come with all the baggage.
yeah.
And
Isn't
I
that
knew that if
self-firing wonderful?
yeah, yeah, and so that was actually perfect. It worked out perfectly because with her leaving, yes, I lost some people that might have otherwise come to the studio and started because she was there. But then at the same time, I think I it would have been so much harder to deal with all of the
Yeah,
stuff that was already
yeah.
there. So it felt more like a cleaner slate the way it
And
was
more,
done.
it's having people in alignment so that it's
Yeah,
not feeling awkward as a new person coming in, and
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I did, and then I did hire some
yeah.
other
Yeah,
teachers
can you
from the
tell me about
start.
that process? How did you go about that? How did you build your faculty?
So one of them was extremely easy. I had a someone that I had already taught with in the city, and she had also moved up here, and she's an amazing teacher. And so when I opened, she was the first
Uh,
one. It was like,
You
"Do
must
you
feel
want to do
excited
this?"
about that one.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I
yeah.
was like, because because when she moved up here, she stopped teaching, and she had just been telling me about, "Oh, I wish at some point I could go teach again." And I was like, "Okay, I got it.
Done.
I'm opening a studio. You want it? What hours do you want? I'll work with you." And so that one was really easy, and I knew that she would really fit with what I wanted, and that was an easy one. But the other ones, I mostly just went to some of the people that I trusted, that I know that would know people in the community that might be yoga teachers that would fit. I explained them what I was trying to open, this home studio that was really based in community, around community. I wanted people to be really local. So instead of getting
Mm.
people from further away, I've really looked into our local community and who are the best teachers that I can find in this local community that also fit with what I'm trying to do, that also want to come and practice at the studio and really be part of
Mm.
it, be part of the community. So you're
What's
not
your
just this.
definition of best there? Because I will say a studio is only as good
Yeah.
as the teachers.
Yeah. Best for me is, oh, that's a really good question in the sense that
It's the standard, right?
it's the standard. Like when someone comes in and teaches, it's just when someone does a demo for you, you very quickly know, okay,
Yeah,
you have the experience, you have done this several years. I can see how you know how to offer different variations of things. I can
yeah.
see that you can command a room. You have the voice projection of it, or you can see that you feel secure about doing this.
Don't you think
So from
confidence has a lot to do with it too? That
yeah, there's
I
a
confidence as far as I feel like people in a class setting want a leader, and I don't mean that as in an
yeah,
ego, but they want to follow. Just tell me what to do. And so someone that
exactly.
stands up there and says, "Hey, let's do this."
Yeah.
Modifications, but follow me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. So it's like that command of the room, right?
it is the
There's
command of
this,
the room. Yeah.
and yeah, that is a big thing that I look for when I'm looking with people is
Did you
someone
learn
that
that? Did you learn that by mistake, trial and error,
mm,
or did you already have a good?
I was fortunate in that sense that I for several years it was called a director of healthy living at the
Okay.
YMCA. And what I did there was I basically ran all of their programming, which was like about 100 classes a week. a little
That's a
more even.
superpower to bring to a
Like,
studio.
yeah, it was maybe 120 classes a week. It was actually 120 classes a week, or 125, and 100 teachers. But I had to do a lot
Yeah,
of hiring and firing. And so I had to do a lot of demos. And this is not all yoga, right? This was all
yeah,
sorts of things.
yeah,
But
yeah,
yoga was a big part of it too. And so I luckily had the experience of seeing the differences when someone
yeah,
walks in and be like, oh, okay, so you really can commend this room. And
yeah,
there might be some things that I would do a little different, but we can work on that. But the commending of the room is something that needs to be there. And the other things we can perfect and make better. But then sometimes when someone walks in and they're really insecure or not sure what to do or have a really hard time with it, then that just takes more time. And doesn't mean
yeah,
you cannot get there, but that was not what I wanted to start my studio with for sure. I
yeah,
wanted to
yeah.
just have people that
Well, I
felt
also, I
strong
mean,
and
I'm not sure if you feel the same way. I hired a lot of teachers over the years as well. And I always found that not all, some of them, but right out of teacher training, they're just not quite ready. It's just like
yeah,
you don't have it. I did a year apprenticeship, but it takes a
yeah.
while to find your voice.
Yes. To find your voice and your own style, because that's also a thing I see.
Yeah,
When
but
someone
we
comes just out
start.
of teacher training, you start with what you've been taught. This is what
Yeah, we
you, yeah.
emulate our, yeah, we, I feel like we emulate and use the words of other people until we
Hmm.
find our own inner
Yeah.
feelings of it to express. So yeah,
Yeah.
I
And
think you
that
have
can
to go
take a
through that
while.
process. Yeah,
You have to. Yeah. And it
yeah,
can take a while. I do have someone right now that I've put on a sub list for us who is newer out of the gates, but had a pretty strong command of the room and
yeah,
has some stuff to learn. But I was like, if you want to come onto our sub list and you can get
yeah,
like the
yeah,
opportunities to come and do it and learn without me having to put someone onto the full schedule yet. But I did see a lot of potential
yeah.
in this person.
I
Yeah.
had a few people like that. One that's gone on to become a really great teacher in particular. That but they used to come to my class and I would have them help me adjust and look
Yeah.
and because for me teaching, it's actually about watching. It's actually about
Hmm.
looking. It's what is really going on here. So it's like
It's a lot about that.
you're
Is
talking, but
going.
yeah, but
But
are people doing what you're
yeah,
saying?
yeah. And you're looking at their bodies, right? Like
You
how are
are.
their bodies moving? What is going, what are they struggling with? What can you verbally at least also give as cues
Yeah.
that more than one person might benefit from? Yeah. And so I always joke whenever with my friends and they do something and I make a comment that maybe is out of the ordinary about their body and I'm like, that's what I do. I look at bodies all day long. I'm just looking at your body.
I know it.
Because they're like, sometimes it's weird when you say something, you're like, were you watching me? I was like, it's what I do. It's like
Yeah,
natural.
I know. Was walking around with my partner around the Rose Bowl. I'm like, yeah, your right arch is collapsing.
Yeah.
Your ankles.
We say these weird things and they're like, what? Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Okay, so you've opened this beautiful studio,
Yeah.
you building this team. Can you tell me the process about how you put your class schedule together? Was that a did you throw it at the wall and see if it was going to hit? Did you use
Mm.
previous studio as an example, or did you do any research into audience and what they need? What was your
So the first big one was obviously I'm sharing my schedule with kids yoga. So I
right?
had certain hours that I couldn't touch because it was like that is the hours that we put up for kids.
Okay, yeah.
So that limited sort of
Upfront agreement, yeah.
upfront agreement. So I had certain other hours. And then the classes, so I mostly try to focus on like families and like parents and the greater of that too. So it does include everybody in the end. But I just looked at, okay, younger parents and like their grandparents, caregivers, what would they need? What are the things?
So
So
we're talking about here globally going, what's my general person here? What's my
yeah,
general
yeah.
avatar?
Yeah. Who am I writing to? Who am I trying to get into the studio? Who am I building this community for? And since we have the kids also, it was like a natural sort of thing of
Synergy between.
yeah, we're going to
And they
be
were run as two
working.
different businesses.
We're run as two different
Yeah.
businesses. Get obviously we get kids in, and then their parents come bring the kids, and
Yeah.
the other way
Yeah,
around.
yeah,
We get
yeah.
people in and they
Yeah.
have kids and they bring the kids. So it's
Yeah,
like a
yeah.
perfect thing. So
Yeah.
anyway,
Yeah.
so how I built the schedule from there was I just basically asked around like a lot of people that I knew that I thought, okay, you would be my demographic. And what kind of classes would you be looking for? And what kind of hours would you be interested in coming? And so I set up a schedule, my first schedule when I started, and it looks pretty different now.
Yeah.
Because once we started doing it, I was like,
First of all, we find out that everybody will tell you what they want,
everybody will tell you what they want.
right?
Everybody will give you suggestions about,
But
what else could
it's
be.
actually when I was talking to a studio owner a couple of days ago. It's actually when they show up, they're actually voting for the class
Yeah.
because they can say
Right?
it, but it's right.
Because there's a big difference between someone saying, I would really love this
I
on a
want that
Thursday
6
night.
a.m.
And then they never show up. You're like, okay, I just tried to put this in for you. No, but the main thing I just realized what was actually really beautiful. So my first focus is, okay, we're going to be really focused on families and younger parents, etc. But then when people started showing up, it was so beautifully a really diverse community, which was like actually like a gift to me because that is was maybe more what I wanted without me actually really knowing it. But it was like there's people in there that are 16 and there's people in there in their 80s. And when I do a class, it's literally like this morning I was teaching a power class with someone in there that's in their early 20s and someone in there that's in his 70s.
Yeah.
And we're still doing a powerful class, right? But it was just really beautiful to see that the community that started showing up was from all walks of life, from all ages. And so I also started changing a little more to what type of classes I was doing. So in the beginning, it was a lot of vinyasa, power, like flows, like a lot of movement. And now I have been putting in like yoga nidra, yin yoga, something I call
Yeah.
mindful flow. So it's a flow, but it
Are
goes a
you
lot
saying that
slower.
did the audience change, or did you change, or did the attendance change?
Oh, all
Oh,
of it.
yeah.
Oh, in the sense that the audience was just more diverse than I first anticipated on. Then two, when the audience started showing up, even like the young parents that I thought wanted to just the ones that I spoke to were all like, I just want to work out and I just want to feel like I walk out and I've had done a workout. Like a lot of them ended up coming to classes, like a mindful flow, for example, that I started putting in, which is way slower and way more just more calmer. And they loved it. They were like, this is exactly what I need
Right,
because
right.
I just
Yeah.
actually need to slow
It's
down.
the antidote. Yeah, it's the antidote to life. All the
Right.
life stresses. Yeah.
And so it was just funny because people were thinking, I need this. And then they showed up for something else. They were like, oh, wow, this is actually what I need.
Right. Yeah.
And
Isn't
so
it the
that is how it changed, where I was like, oh, so we need to have a way bigger variety. And so now I'm at like, I don't know what version of schedule I am, but recently changed stuff around again. And,
yeah, and I see
and
that
it's,
you've got a pretty full schedule.
yeah, yeah,
And I
wanting to
see
be
that I'm
able,
just looking at it right now. You also did you switch to Fit Degree? My good
I,
friends at Fit Degree.
no, that was what I took over from the previous owner, Fit Degree.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, and it's been a great tool actually to have because they do have a lot of community options in it too, which
They
like
do. That's actually
what
one of my
I
favorite options
yeah,
is their community. Do people
yeah,
use that? Does your community
yeah,
use the community?
yeah. Yes, they
Yeah.
actually do. People send me chats all the time.
So they're
They're like, "Hey,
connecting on
Martine."
there, right?
Yeah, and then also my teachers, they send out messages to people when someone hasn't been there for a while. One teacher in particular, she's amazing at this. She's just, oh, I haven't seen such and such for a while. Let me send them a message. And then toot, she goes into that chat and sends them a message. And then most of the time they'll show up next week or the next class. So they're
Yeah,
like, oh yeah,
yeah,
you send me a
yeah.
message. And yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
that
So
is
that's
one of my.
been
I always look for it when the software companies. I always ask, "What's your differentiators?" And that's one of the things I love by Fit Degree. They're a great company and great people. But yeah, that's for me, it's their differentiator, and I feel
mhm,
like it's actually in perfect alignment with everything that's important to you and your studio to have a piece of
yeah.
technology that actually helps support the humanness
Hmm.
of a
Yeah.
studio.
Yes. Yes, I agree with that. That is just really important to have if that's what you find really important. Because there's also this thing which is a little bit away from what you're saying, but I hear it very often, people saying, I really want community or community is important or I do this for the community. But then I don't see the actions or their
Yeah.
software really
Yeah.
reflecting it. Because often what it means is that people say, hey, I know that community is not that's wrong. Let's be so from it.
Yeah.
Hey, I see that community is good because that means that I can sell more of this thing or I can make bigger what I want to. But it's not necessarily that their choices that they make are also informed by the fact that they really want to build communities. As we just talked about, like hiring people, like for me, one of the big things was also, as I said, that they wanted to be part of the community. So they also wanted to
Yeah.
come and practice. They also want to,
Yes.
they are
Yes.
local. So people, they'll see our members out in the street and in the supermarket, and they need to be okay with that. It is also in one of the things that I've started doing, and I've been doing it for almost from the start, is that people in the community come up and say, I have this offering. Can I offer something to your community? Which I do. So it's a free community offering. And so someone has done a free sound healing.
Mm.
I have someone that did a talk on like posture and pelvic floor because that was an issue that a lot of people in the community had. And she was like, yeah, I would love to talk about it. We have someone
Mm.
that wants to come in and do some chanting or someone that wants to come, but it's like a community offering. So it comes from the community, from my members, and they offer it. And people love it because they really, the other members show up for it.
Well,
Yeah. And so that has
and
been really,
I just speaking of that, I'm just looking at your website where it says every Sunday morning, join us for live music. That must be
yeah,
like
also
church
that.
on Sunday mornings going to.
Yeah. Yes, that is, and that's also with local musicians. So I have four local musicians that rotate. They all have their fixed Sunday. And yeah, and they come in and it's also diverse. So one plays the sitar, I have a DJ, I have someone that sings acoustic songs, and then someone that comes in with like different types of guitars and plays those. And that also has just been really
Because that's the
lovely.
thing, those are the things that people, it's the buzz kind of talk. One of my clients and a local amazing Vancouver yoga studio here, Stretch Vancouver, they do, and I've been dying to go to it and they haven't done it for a while, but they have the hammocks,
Mm-hmm.
the yoga hammocks, and they do cello
Mm,
evenings for that, and I've been
nice.
dying to go to that, but I
Yeah.
love that. So back to you. We've launched this amazing studio. We've got these great classes now. This is Yoga Biz Champ podcast. So on the business side of things,
Yeah.
you and I had a little bit of a pre-chat about this, and so I really want to delve a little bit here. But it's that I and I, this has been a theme this season on this
Mhm.
podcast, but it's that yoga teacher, passionate, driven yoga teacher, creative, serving, and then all of a sudden you're running a business where you've got rent,
Yeah.
you've got payroll, you've
Mhm.
got marketing, you are also the janitor, the pay doing the payroll, you're the HR person, you're the marketing director. So it's a lot
Wow.
of pieces, right?
Mhm.
Can you tell me a little bit about that? And was it easy for you or was that a learning process? I'd love to hear
Not
yours.
easy. Not easy at all.
That's
And
why people hire me when they before they open to help
yeah,
build
no,
that.
it's a lot. Like the funny thing is when obviously I don't know, obviously, I wouldn't want to assume anything. When you open a studio, I think you probably go and Google some, what does it mean to open a studio? What do you have to do? At least that's what I
Yoga
did.
studio marketing plan.
I know, like you Google all of the things. But one of the things that I kept on seeing was like, make sure you don't do it all by yourself. And I was like, okay, but like, how do you not? Like, you just start this thing, like, where does the money come from? And yeah, I did it all and do it all mostly still by myself. But I also really quickly into it was like, this is very unsustainable. You can do it all by yourself because the thing when you say, was it easy? I very naively, I call it naive, particularly because I just did not realize how much goes into running a yoga studio. From the outside, it looks like, okay, you need to have a schedule, you need to have your teachers in place, and then there will be some subs happening, and you might be teaching some and answer some emails. but it's so much more than that. It's
Changing
just,
quickly.
and it changes
Yeah.
constantly. There's
Yeah.
constant movement in things. And yeah, so I was very shocked by how much work it actually was. And then on top of that, which was also my bio, I have two really little children,
Yeah.
1 and 3. And so
And
to be
trying to
doing
learn this
this
during the pandemic too.
and trying to do this, yeah, that's hard.
Yeah.
And I've just been looking also to, okay, what are ways that I can find help? What are ways that
Because
where
did you feel like it was this is the conversation I have with new people I meet, studio owners, that it can be a bit of a lonely place. It's like partners don't really understand the nuances of running a yoga studio, which is a people business, right? Our teachers are people, our students are people, and they come with challenges, and then there's the finance.
yeah. Yeah, I think that it's very lonely. And yeah, I find that was the funny thing about it, because I started it because I felt very lonely in the pandemic. And I was like, yoga has always been my community. And it
Yeah.
is. So this is the side to it. I love how many people in the community I've met, how many people I see on the street now and then wave. And the other day I was out with my kids for a little walk, and I kid, 3 cars after each other stopped. Hey, Martine, are these your kids?
There's the bonuses
Yeah.
and the other side
And
sometimes to
and
being
then the
in
other side to it is also it's lonely, because you have to make all the decisions by yourself. You have to
yeah.
arrange all the things by yourself. And then I had this conversation with my mom the other day, who lives in the Netherlands still, and she was here, and she goes, "Just I don't understand why you're so busy. What do you even do?" And I
Yeah.
was like, "I don't even know where to start. It's a lot of things, Mom. Like anything you would see in the studio somehow needs to be done." Right. So yes, I have someone that comes and cleans, but it also in between needs to be cleaned. I have water that people can drink and tea that people can drink. So we need to make sure that there's water. We need to
Yeah.
make sure that there's tea. We need to make sure
So
that the cups are
can
clean.
you
We need
tell
like,
me about were the things that just briefly of what was super easy for you running the business, and then what were the things that you identified as, oh my God,
let me get 1 second
the
to think what
community,
was super
because
easy.
community is easy for you, right? The community,
Yeah.
the teaching, the
Yeah. The community teachers teaching, finding who I wanted to be part of the studio, like which
yeah,
teachers I wanted to be part of the studio. I didn't struggle with that very much.
yeah,
And opening it up and just having this buzz and
yeah,
yeah. And
yeah,
then the
yeah,
part that I find hard is I'm actually not a marketing person,
right,
not a finance person. I like numbers,
yeah,
but yeah, to have a good plan in place of, okay, how do I market this? Because there's this first buzz of like we're opening up and people talk about it, and then, you know,
yeah, yeah.
then you exist.
Because you've
And
always
so
got to keep feeding it with new people, right? That's
always
the
that was
that's the lesson. That was my lesson. Quickly said,
hmm
I've said this on multiple episodes. I opened, I thought I've got my tribe. This is
hmm
it. But there's a thing
yeah.
called churn.
So one of
People
the
come,
things
people
that
go.
one of the things that I think was most frustrating for me was that I opened up the studio. I did something that was called a founding membership. I got
Yeah,
like this, that was my starting capital basically to pay for the bills and etc., which was amazing. But then to get people to at some point it became this thing. It was like one in, one out, one in,
yeah,
one out.
yeah,
And I
yeah,
was stuck in that pattern and it
yeah,
just drove me
yeah.
bonkers. I was like, what's happening? And over time, because in the beginning, when I put out what I learned though was like in the beginning, when I put out that founding membership, there were just people that just signed up because it was just a damn good deal, because
Yeah.
that's also part of this
But it didn't mean
community.
they actually attended.
Didn't mean they actually attended. And also, one thing I want to say, where I live, it's like it's a really expensive area in the country. And so I price everything a little lower, and I do a lot of like memberships for like people that educators and healthcare workers, and so that
Yeah,
other people actually also can do a membership, because when you live in an area with a lot of wealth, the first thought is like, oh, I can just make it more expensive because people can pay for it. But there's also a ton of people that live
yeah,
here that
yeah,
actually can afford it.
yeah,
But
yeah,
anyway, but I saw just a lot of people that had just signed up and never really showed up. And so it was like this slow process of people dropping off and
yeah,
people that actually come
yeah. They're not
joining.
coming, they're not going to see the value of their
No.
membership, right? So if they're not attending, they're going to go,
And
oh,
and
that's
you
a
don't
waste of
see it in
money.
your attendance. It
And they're
doesn't
not
mean
going to
that
feel
fills up your
successful. Yeah.
Yeah, but it also, you don't see it in your numbers of attendance and you don't see it in your classes. And so you want the people to actually also come to your classes. You're actually
Yeah.
teaching people.
Yeah.
So yeah, that part I found extremely frustrating, and that made me really realize how much work goes into getting people in your door. And that was one thing
So
that I
the
realized as a
lead part,
teacher.
the like the actual lead of getting a new person to
Yeah,
see, yeah, and purchase.
because if you are a teacher, I had taught for many years, and I had really gotten pretty good at, if someone comes to my class, how do I get them back into my class if they like
Yeah,
what?
the
So
retention. Yeah,
I was good at that part, but then getting someone back to your class is a whole different ballgame than getting someone into your studio. Completely different,
yeah,
and I that was like a really big learning, and I'm still figuring that out. To be very honest, like how do I reach the people that I want to with all the different platforms that are there? Because I haven't really found, yeah, it's just a constant feeding of like, okay, I'll
yeah.
try this out and then I'll try that out and I'll see what happens when I put up, like I
What
set
have
up a
you
lot of
what have you done
partnerships.
that have you what have you figured out, or what did you figure out for help? Or
So there's a few things. What have I figured out? I figured out, in what sense do you mean that actually?
and
Just
so we got introduced by via the sales arm.
yeah,
So Stephanie, my good
yeah,
friend, and
yeah,
Chris at the SalesARM, who've been on previous episodes of my podcast. And
yes.
so I was super curious, like how this community studio. So the SalesARM is a, what would you call them? They're real human people that help
Mm-hmm.
studios with lead retention, follow up kind of thing.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so you made a decision at some point to get some
yes.
help.
Yes. And so so it was funny because I was looking for some help around marketing. I was like, I'm not good at this and I don't know how to do the social media very well. That's not my forte. And so I was actually looking for something like that. I was like,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
And I
just
started talking to different people and I just couldn't really find the right click. I couldn't really find the right place. And then Fit Degree sent out this.
I think they've done some webinars,
And
some
yeah,
podcasts.
sent out a podcast with SalesARM, and I listened to it, and I was like, "Oh, that actually sounds really interesting, and maybe a little more of what I need right now." And that's how I got connected with the SalesARM. And what is so great with working with them is that they take on. They basically are in contact with everybody that comes into my studio and that's new, and they'll send them a text message and they'll get them engaged, and so they get people to come back in. They keep track of, oh, I
And
have.
you can see all those conversations and the activity that they're doing with your clients, right?
You don't see the literal conversations, but everybody they're in contact with,
Yeah,
when the contact points are, and they share with you like any feedback they're getting. So if it's positive or negative, like I get a lot of feedback on, oh, people like this and this is going well. We've had very few negative things, but the few things that
yeah,
we had were, for example, like people wanted, we're not a hot yoga studio, so people wanted it to be hot, and I was like, okay, that's not who we are.
yeah,
That's a choice I've made. But yeah, that was the part where I was looking for help, and I was like, "This is I need to offload something," and it's just a lot of time and effort that goes into this, and they are personal, so it's an actual person behind a text message, and it's not something that is automated, and that was important to me because we get so many automated text messages and phone
yeah.
calls and
And so what's the
emails.
results been for you? So are people getting back on the mats more? What's the feedback to that?
So what I saw was you have the metrics that say, oh, like when a new person comes in, like after in how many, what percentage of new person comes back in 30 days. And
Yeah,
so mine was, I think, somewhere constantly hanging around somewhere between 15 and 20%
yeah,
prior to doing this. And now it's been up to 35 to 40%. So there's a lot more people that come in for the first time
yeah,
that
yeah,
come in again. And that and that's mostly because they just book them again. They'll just contact them and be like,
yeah,
"Hey, how did it go? What did you think? So awesome! Did you want to try out another class?" And so and they'll book it for them. And so that makes it easier. And today I had someone in actually that was like, "You have to thank your Emma," is my person at the sales firm. She was like, "You have to thank Emma because Emma kept on texting me, and I finally decided I need to do this. I need to do this membership."
yeah.
So yeah.
Can you talk about that decision? Because this is the one that a lot of my studio owners, when they've opened and they're making that decision to invest money, something that's going to cost them money, where they might not have a lot of extra, but that I always say that if you're investing in people, software, systems, whatever, it should result in better sales, better attendance. It shouldn't be a big drain on you.
Yeah. For me, it was scary to make the decision because I was like, it's money that you like, do I have that right now? But I, I think it was the right thing to do because you need to invest. If
Yeah.
again, like you can do it all by yourself because it's not
It's smart
sustainable
investing though. It's
and
like
it's
it's
smart
like
investing.
yeah,
Yeah, and you need to think about what it is for you that you need help with. So be clear on that.
yeah,
What is the thing that
yeah,
you need help with? And in my case, I just felt like having someone really dedicated to helping me get my low-hanging fruit, people that already found their way to the studio and coming in. And they
yeah,
also do other stuff like grassroots. So I'm setting up a lot of partnerships with local businesses, and they help me out with that. And so to get like a stream of more steady stream of people coming in, and
yeah.
then have them,
And then keeping them.
and then keeping them, and then
Because
keep
I call that
engaging
part
with them.
leakage, right? We spend a lot of
Yeah,
time, effort, money to get people in the door. And
yeah,
then I've been to so many gyms where I bought an intro offer. Nobody's been there to greet me.
yeah,
I've gone to classes and then my gym membership intro expired and I didn't hear anything.
yeah,
Is
exactly.
and so what you're trying to do is get that retention part up and stop
Get
the
that retention
leakage.
part up. And the thing also is right now, as we're growing and building, I don't have a dedicated front desk
Yeah,
staff yet. And some of my teachers are great at this, like asking
yeah,
people
yeah,
after class, like, how was it? And I'll have people engaged. And some of them aren't. And I felt like I can't always be dependent on the teacher that where this might not be their
yeah,
thing. I can't really,
yeah.
I would hope that they can help me out with that. But yeah, I just can't rely on it. And so this has just been a great way to get people
Yeah, but
back
that's
in.
super helpful because I think everybody needs help in some. I was everything. I
Yeah,
always say it every single day. I'm saying triple down on your own superpowers and your passions,
yeah, yeah,
and
exactly.
delegate the things that you put off every single day because it's at the bottom of your list because
Exactly.
it drags you down. We've been talking a long time here. I do want to just
Yeah.
touch on one thing if you have time, and that
Yeah.
is that just touching on that standing into your own bare feet as a studio owner and being able to we had a pre-talk about this but just that that moment of standing in your own 2 feet bare feet at the studio and saying it's okay for me to have these expectations, it's okay for me to want my teachers to be up leveled, it's okay to say when something doesn't feel right.
Yes. I think when we talked about this in a little pre-chat, I was saying to you how that has actually also been a part of a learning for
Yeah,
me, like a big learning curve, because studio owner, you have to, and I think you even owe it to your teachers to do it. But for me, it was a hard thing to do, and I found it really hard to find examples of people where I was like, how do you do this in a way that's really compassionate and kind and still true to who I am and sending my own 2 feet and who I am as a leader of this studio or as the owner of this studio without really
and not cave into some
um,
diva attitudes and
exactly. And that part I really struggled with. But I do think that a great example for me was there was one teacher and she was teaching a class, and that was at like a more prime time hour. And we just couldn't get the class to grow. And I didn't know how to talk to her about it because I knew that if I was going to pull it or anything, she was going to be sad about it and disappointed. Until I start realizing that she was teaching a format where she needed a lot of props. First of all, I couldn't grow it because I didn't have enough props. But second, like she was really good in like the personal attention. And so whenever it would grow beyond, like whenever a class would be beyond 10 people, it just became mayhem and chaos and people just
right,
really didn't like it.
right.
And I yeah, at some point I was just like, I can just really talk to her about this concept of, hey, what you're doing is really amazing and people love it, but we need to keep it smaller. And so I need to keep you in other places. And she actually was relieved. And that was the biggest
Uh,
lesson for me. She felt relief because she kept on feeling the push of like, needs to be bigger. And she was like, I can't, like, it's not what I can do with this particular class. And so we were able to move it around and put her somewhere else where she is happy, where I don't feel like it needs to actually be really
yeah,
big and
yeah,
she can keep it really personalized. And that was a big moment for me where it changed, where it flipped in my head. It was like, it's so important to actually be really honest about it, to let
yeah,
people
yeah,
really know where they stand, to not tiptoe around it, to not, you can still be kind and compassionate and really explain it. But
yeah.
it's for the greater good of your studio, of the community. And so yeah, it's important to really be clear on
And
certain decisions that you make.
sometimes it's okay that they're not a fit.
Sometimes it's okay that they're not a fit. Also that, like you're
Yeah,
gonna also have that, obviously.
yeah,
Luckily, I haven't had that yet, but sometimes they're not a
yeah.
fit. Yeah.
I am really happy we got to talk today. I find stories like this just so inspiring because I help studio owners open and grow. Quite often, they come out of just a spark. We create a space just from an idea. And
Mhm.
you know how you create this amazing space from your spark in Brazil and wanting to come back and create your own home studio. So I
Yeah.
want to really thank you for your time here today. I just got
Yes.
a couple of final questions we'll end my podcast with, and that is, what's a business tool, like a go-to business tool that you find really helpful, or website or app or something that really
Canva.
helps you?
I
Hmm?
use Canva.
Canva,
Canva
yeah,
a
yeah,
lot. It makes doing marketing
yeah.
anything so
Branding,
much
yeah. It's what
easier.
there's
Create
certain
your branding
products,
kit in there.
yeah.
Create your branding kit in there, and once you have that set up, bang, it's so easy. You post in your logos, your colors, your photos. Oh
And
my
there's
god, it
certain
just
things that you pay for monthly, and that's
yeah,
one that doesn't hurt me when I look at it on the
no,
credit card because I get
no,
value out of that.
totally.
Yeah.
It's worth the
Great.
money.
Yeah.
Invest in it. Yeah.
What about a personal website app? Where would you hang out? Where do you app website?
I thought it was one for giggles. One that where you will find me sometimes when I need to zone out
Yeah.
is people.com.
People.com. Okay, yeah.
Because it is just really easy where I'm like, okay, I can just look at people, look at bodies. That's what we do. But then in a very different way.
That's great.
Yeah. But
And
nothing yoga. Yeah.
if you were a yoga pose, what would you be and why?
I would be a dancer pose. And the reason for it is that I think in dancer you have to balance. And being a yoga studio owner, being a mom, there's a lot of balancing that needs to
Yeah.
happen, balancing all these different needs. And I also think that pose is very heart opening. So keeping your heart open
Yeah.
in it to not close off. And then it's also dancing to me is very community based. Like you do
Yeah.
that with others and it creates connection. It's a very freeing pose and also fierce in a way. If you really do
Yeah,
it,
so you
it's
gotta be
fierce,
strong on the leg, you
strong, right?
get that
And
beautiful
yeah,
opening, you get the chest and shoulder opening,
yeah,
and
yeah.
yeah,
So
it is a good one.
that's me.
Yeah,
That's me.
I
Yeah.
love it. Where do people find you? What's your website?
My website is homestudio.yoga. On Instagram, that's also at homestudio.yoga. My personal one is at Yogi Team.
And I love
Yeah,
that there's
that
a .yoga URL now.
I know. Isn't that exciting? I couldn't get what I wanted in .com, and I was like, they have .yoga? Oh, perfect. I'll take that.
Yeah. Martine, thank you so much. It's been a
You're
pleasure.
welcome.
Thank you for sharing your story with my listeners.
Yes, you're welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you. And that wraps up another episode of Yoga Biz Champ, where we dive deep into the heart of building and nurturing the soul of yoga communities. A huge thank you to Martine for sharing her journey and the beautiful story behind Home Studio. Her dedication to creating a space of connection and community truly embodies what it means to lead with passion and purpose. If Martine's story has ignited a spark within you to start or grow your own yoga studio, remember you don't have to navigate this journey alone. Whether you're dreaming of opening your own studio or looking to elevate your existing space, my Start a Yoga Studio and Grow a Yoga Studio coaching packages are designed to guide you through each step of the process, from building a community-centric studio like Martine's to mastering the business side of running a successful yoga haven. I'm here to support you, so visit my website at yogabizchamp.com/podlink to discover how we can make your yoga studio dreams a reality. Don't forget to hit follow on your favorite podcast platform to stay updated with more inspiring stories and practical advice from leaders in the yoga industry. Rate and review us on Apple Podcasts or wherever you get your podcasts. Your feedback helps us grow and reach more passionate yogis like you. Please do it. And for daily inspiration, tips, and peek behind the scenes, follow me on Instagram at Yoga Biz Champ. Let's continue the conversation, share your journey, and connect with the community of like-minded yoga business champions. Thank you for tuning in to Yoga Biz Champ. I'm Michael J, reminding that in the world of yoga business, you're only one breath away from making a profound impact. Namaste.